So what we were really looking for was something that could scale, that the costs didn't essentially grow with it, or as much. Something that we could offer to clients that was of a lower cost. And it was quite significantly lower because we didn't need the team behind it. And something that was just a bit easier. It's an easy sell. It's so easy to fulfill. It's so easy to get clients set up on. In 6 weeks, just with our UpHex offer, we got to 25K a month in monthly recurring revenue.
All right, guys, welcome back to the channel. I'm joined by Jess Cotter, and we've been having a lovely conversation. And sometimes the conversations, when I'm getting to know a new, a person that we haven't met before previously, they start getting into like the actual meaty content. Like we jump right into the good stuff. And that's what was happening with you and I. So I had to stop the conversation and say, all right, Jess, this is too good. Let's jump back into the actual content creation portion of the YouTube channel. So Jess, thank you for being here with me today. For those of you, or for those of people who are unfamiliar with you, could you just give us like a 1-minute intro into you, your background, and then we'll jump into the conversation here?
Of course. So yeah, I'm Jess. I'm from Wales in the UK. Some people have heard of it, most people haven't. An agency owner. I've now been in the agency space for over 5 years. I've got a business partner who has also been in the space for over 15 years. That experience helps a lot. And yeah, I used to be a recruitment consultant before, so very different to being in marketing, but has given me a lot of experience around hiring, etc. That's helped a lot on scaling. And yeah, now spend my time obviously with the agency and investing in some other agencies, which is really fun. And just kind of enjoying life as a business owner, which I didn't for quite a while, and realized that wasn't how I wanted to build things. So I took a step back and restarted basically. And yeah, very glad to be in the position that I'm in now. So yeah, really thank you for having me.
No, I'm excited to have you. So you came on my radar, I think, right. Again, you were saying, so Ken, your partner, he was in our first Ask Me Anything meetings. I remember him. He was, in the solar niche, and he had great questions. And again, you guys were in that first batch. And then I started seeing your personal profile, posting videos of UpHex and all that kind of stuff. So I've seen you guys doing some, some good work over the last while. And, so you and I are friends. Now we're friends for real. Right.
Yeah.
So we're friends on Facebook. And so I see your posts. I'm like, there's a lot of movement happening here. You guys are doing some cool stuff. And recently you had a pretty I don't know if the word is viral, but a very exciting post in our Facebook group where you were offering the opportunity for people to come and work with you guys directly. So I said, you know what, let's get on and get to know each other and share some value with the people. Now, just in overall terms, to kind of frame out this conversation, you currently either own or are partnered with how many agencies?
4 at the moment.
Yeah, 4. And you're starting up with 2 new ones, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's not like you have a little bit of experience, and your core competency is in the fulfillment and in the operational side of the agency. Is that kind of where you'd say?
Yeah, really kind of the operations, the systems, the scaling of the actual business. We do a lot obviously with acquisition and sales, but my core skills lie in the operations, systemizing, strategizing to scale to wherever someone wants to scale their agency to, whether that's 50K a month or 100K a month or beyond that, whichever one it is.
Yeah. So again, the conversation we were having, I want to jump right back into where we were. We probably need to frame out a little bit of your background. So talk about your agencies, your acquisition, your quick growth. You guys were using UpHex. You had some quick growth with UpHex. So maybe you could talk through how you're using it to grow, and then specifically the case study where you did it. I can't remember what the number was. In 6 weeks, you did something.
Yeah, in 6 weeks, just with our UpHex offer, we got to 25K a month in monthly recurring revenue.
Yes.
And yeah, so we had the full service side of the agency, and like I was saying, as you scale an agency, your costs increase very quickly, because it's not just that you're hiring someone for the fulfillment. You also have to hire someone to manage that client, because you're not having an ads manager manage a client. You need an account manager.
Right.
And your costs do increase quite quickly with that. And a lot of people don't realize it, because you're not just going to go and chuck a load of VAs into your business. So what we were really looking for was something that could scale, that the costs didn't essentially grow with it, or as much. Something that we could offer to clients that was of a lower cost. And it was quite significantly lower, because we didn't need the team behind it. And something that was just a bit easier. It's an easy sell. It's so easy to fulfill. It's so easy to get clients set up on. There was no longer kind of like a week-long setup process. You could have a 15-minute call and it was done. It just made everything a lot more efficient. And it was quite nice, because we didn't just have to say, right, okay, this is like our lowest offer now. We also tiered the offer, which worked really well for us. So people could enter kind of on different price points depending on what they wanted alongside UpHex. And yeah, it just allowed things to scale a lot nicer. We weren't having to hire at the volume that new clients were coming in. And yeah, you didn't need kind of ads managers and people like that. It was more kind of customer support, etc. We didn't need the bi-weekly check-in calls for it. And yeah, it saved a lot of costs when scaling this side of the agency compared to scaling the full service side.
I think that's a big thing that, especially people who are newer into the space, they don't understand. It's almost like a surprise that as you get more customers, now you need a second media buyer, or you need to replace yourself because you're the media buyer, right? Because,
exactly.
I have to do higher, thought activity things. I got to bring in a media buyer. Now I got to bring in an account manager. Well, that guy makes $5,000 per month. This guy makes $7,000, like whatever it is. You're like, oh man, I have to go out and acquire this many more customers to pay for them. And so you get to like this like the gap of despair, right? So you're here. And in order for you to start making a living again, you got to get here. The gap between them is a rapid growth and training and recruiting and all the things. So not only do you have to get customers, but you have to train and manage the people that are filling that gap for you. And it's so funny that that's where you started, because that was probably, I would say I lived in the gap for the better part of 3 years, right? Where my partner Jacob and I would get to 25 customers. So this was the traditional agency model, right? Where we were charging $1,500 a month. And then we'd get to 25, 30 customers, and man, the wheels would fall off. And anytime we tried to go from 25 to beyond, we knew we needed to hire. We would hire. We knew we needed to train. We didn't do very good at training. And then we would just churn the customers, and we would churn the employee. Right. And so it was this constant cycle. And I think that was one of the first pain points that we looked to solve with UpHex, because then it was anybody can come in and launch these ads, including the customers. So DIY, customers launch them, don't need a media buyer. DFY, if we still wanted to offer that, okay, well, anybody can do it. Like the VA can click it, and we pay like a $5 a month VA, no training. It's literally a 5-minute video. You're good to go. Right. So it's interesting that that's what you led with, but that was kind of like your first scaling agency activity with UpHex. Is that right?
Yeah, definitely. Because it was just something that, I mean, I come from recruitment. Hiring is a big skill of mine, but we were growing so fast that it got to the point where it was like, you were having to hire so fast as well. And it was just something that you kind of was like, right, okay, what's just a little bit easier to scale? It was so easy to sell as well. Like, it's so simple to sell. There was no longer, you didn't need an hour-long sales call anymore. Keep that for the full service side. But for this, it's so self-explanatory. You could we would do demonstrations on the sales call. And people would be like, oh, Simple. Like they get a
Yeah.
CRM with it. Perfect. Like some people are charging like $300 a month just to have a CRM. Perfect. Well, you get this with it. And it became just like our no-brainer offer almost. And and I'm sure you know, a lot of people, no matter what industry you're in, have been burnt by other agencies, have been burnt by people that have come in, overpromised the world to people, and they have become a bit scared of spending the money that they would on
Yes.
a full service package.
Yes.
And it worked quite nicely because you could offer them this when you gained their trust. If they wanted you to take over the fulfillment, then they just leveled up essentially. It just worked as it was a tier basically.
Yeah.
Other people just stay on it. Some people decide, right, okay, well, I've done this for 2 months. I know it actually works now.
Yeah.
I don't want to click the buttons anymore. That's fine. No problem. We'll do it for you. It's just this much a month. And it's a lot simpler. So yeah, it definitely was a lot easier to scale than the full service side. And that's not saying it's like ridiculously hard, but it is easier to scale than full service.
It is hard to scale in full service. I can attest to that. I mean, and I will say this, scaling, I'm not going to use the word scaling, upselling people from the model of DIY, like, and maybe it's DWI, whatever you want to call it, but allowing people to launch their own ads, upselling yep. from there to, hey, you know what, why don't you just let us do the calling, pre-qualifying, prepayment? Why don't you just let us do that? And then you compare that to, you're going to have an employee in-house doing this, or you could have our employee and we'll manage them. Right. And so to your comment on simplicity, people many times when they buy your services, they don't understand exactly what they're buying because you bundle it all together. You don't unpack it.
Exactly.
Right? And so what I have really, and sometimes you create these ideas, and then sometimes you're like, oh, you like, oh, we didn't mean to do that, but it happened. Right. I didn't know. In fact, the idea of UpHex was never to sell DIY. We never thought of that. It just got so simple to the point to where one day I said, this is, because the benchmark, just so you know, the benchmark in UpHex is always, is this stupid simple enough that Sam can do it?
Yeah.
And if that's it, then we got something, right? We're doing it right. And that's kind of where it came out of. And as I personally, because in my agency, I would sell it. Like I was the salesperson. And I would, just like you, I would literally say, watch me launch an ad, click, 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 and just watch it go. And people were always like, wait, really? And I'd always say, once they click the launch button, I'd always say this. I'd say, with that one click, you just replaced your agency.
Yeah.
And they're like, really? I'm like, yeah, that's what they would do. So you're good. Are you good? Was that easy? Yeah, that was easy. So that's really interesting. Now I want to kind of pivot because you said something really, I personally am I feel like I'm going to learn something. I've been doing this for 9 years. I feel like I'm going to learn something right now just by your response. We were talking about SOPs. Mm-hmm. Your core competency is putting in place systems, fulfillment, all that kind of stuff. To me, that is so much more challenging than acquisitions, than selling. Like selling, I'm like, there's so many people that can sell.
Yeah.
But when you were talking about SOPs, people think that you just document what you do and you write it down and then boom, there's your system. And that doesn't scale, that doesn't work. No. I really wanted to like start, picking at your brain and have you construct or deconstruct for me. How do you scale and make more efficient your fulfillment? Because to me, if you can dial in your fulfillment, the amount of profit that is available to you in your agency is so attractive. Whereas if you can't, all of the profit gets sucked into whether it's other softwares, other people mostly, or just refunds, whatever it is. So tell me, wave a magic wand for everybody, please.
Yeah. So it's a massive thing that so many agency owners come to me about. And when I look at their agency, a lot of people, they see online, right, you've got to start making SOPs. Cool, I'm going to start this Google Doc. Awesome. I'm going to write out what I'm doing. Brilliant. Well, you've just written out what you do, which is fine, but you already know what you do. You don't necessarily need to write it out. But when you look at that, what you do, can that actually be done by someone else? And if that answer is no, then you haven't actually built out a system that's going to scale. You've just written down what you do. And what you have to think about is every single step, and you have to dissect everything that you do and say, right, okay, this step here, can I train someone else how to do it? Is this simple enough that this person can do it? Is this explained enough that someone else, I could hand over this piece of paper and someone could take this over? And that's what people do wrong, because they think, or they'll miss out steps, or they just skip over things. Well, it's just simple. It's common sense. But you have to have everything in it, that you should literally be able to hand over that SOP to someone, obviously, if it's, say, ads with the skill set, but someone should be able to take it and go, no problem. And you should be able to hand that to 10 different people and they should all be able to do it. And that's where people go wrong, is they don't think about, right, can 10 other people do this without me needing to say a single thing to them? And if they can't, then you haven't built a system that's going to scale.
Yeah.
And that's where people don't dissect it down enough. And people also, when they build an SOP, they'll say, awesome, this can scale. Well, if you ever actually handed that to someone else and said, from this, does this make sense? And could you do it? If they go and say no, then you need to go back and redo it. It's as simple as that. Like, you can't just say that'll do, because the moment you go and make a hire and you hand this over to the hire, well, you've just made your own training 10 times more difficult, because you're going to be adjusting this while training this person. And a big thing that I see a lot is people will expect the new hire to just create an SOP for them, which, yeah, and it's, well, that's not how it works, because this person has never been in your business before. They don't know how you do things. They don't know the process which you've worked with clients previously on and that you want to take forward. And this is like, and I know it's one of the most boring things in an agency to do. I am fully aware of that. No one sits down.
I think it's boring for a person who doesn't understand what it can mean in the long run. For me, it's not boring at all. Like, I would literally, so let me just loop back. So you're right. You can't just, because what I know and what a person who's day 2 on the job, what they know are not the same things.
Not at all.
So how do you do it? Like, is there a method? Is there?
Well, the first thing is setting out, right, okay, well, how do I want to document what I'm doing? So create that, right, I want to do it in a Google Doc. Perfect. Start off really simple. Document the key things that it takes to do that role, like the core of it. Right, okay, and start from there. Does the core of doing whatever task that is, whether it's client management, whether it's acquisition, whatever side of the business it is, how much of the core elements can be done by someone else? And start as simple as you can. Don't try and do it all at once. Out of the core elements, can much of that be done by someone else? Once you've got it to that point, perfect. Start adding the detail then. And then just, you've got to fill it with as much detail as you can. And I can't say there's one like way that fits all to create an SOP at all, because everyone does it in different ways. Some people like to sit there and go down step by step. Other people try different ways, but it's really going, right, okay, every single step of this, can I hand that to someone else and they would understand how to do it? Even as simple as, right, okay, they have to go into a different software here. Are the logins to that software there? Are the steps on how to get into that software, are they included in it? Is it that if it says, right, hand over to an account manager, is there almost a name of that account manager that it's being handed over to? Or does it not matter what account manager this goes over to? But
Right.
it's getting that level of detail that someone else doesn't need to ask you questions on it. And that's what people forget, because they just glaze over the fine details. And they just say, right, okay, well, this is how you do it. Perfect. Well, I can see on this, you go into 4 different softwares to do it. where's the logins to those softwares? What section of those softwares do they need to go in? Is there a different SOP on how to use that software? That should be linked within that SOP. They shouldn't need to go and find it. They should be able to press a button in that SOP, which gets them straight to it. If you want to create a Loom video, I think Loom videos or recording your screen are brilliant in SOPs. To have at the very top, someone can watch it as well as read the steps. And it's not something that you need to overcomplicate, but it's something which you need to constantly be thinking back to yourself. Can this be done by someone else? Can this be done at scale? And you sometimes have to think, well, this can be done at scale, but it's going to take, at scale, one person doing this for each client, they can manage 8 clients. Brilliant. Well, when you start forecasting for the agency, you can then say, right, okay, well, every 8 clients I bring on, I know I need to hire another person in this role. Perfect. You're forecasting for your agency. But it's getting down to that level of detail, which is quite difficult for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And I completely understand why. But it's breaking the agency down to that. And I think another thing, and I know I'm talking a lot, but another thing about that is when you're in the day-to-day of your agency and you're so engrossed in it, it's very hard to see your agency from an external point of view. And it's very hard to see sometimes in the systems that you're doing where your own holes are, because you're so used to them. You know what they are. And sometimes you need to take, like, even taking a day off sometimes and looking back, and you can go like, God, what I do there is really inefficient. Like,
Yeah.
I could make that much better. Because it is, when you're creating your systems and when you're creating your SOPs, a big thing is you want to spot the inefficiencies that you're doing right now. How can you optimize what you're doing? And how do you kind of use that as continuous improvement going forward? How do I constantly improve on what I'm doing? One of the best ways to find out where the holes are in your agency is start documenting it.
Yeah.
Start creating SOPs.
Do you ever find that your SOPs are massive? Like they're just really long? Because you're talking about like documenting what you're doing, but then like adding detail. I mean, that seems to me like a person. Now, I would never probably be an operations person in an agency, so this is probably a moot point. But I can imagine seeing an SOP and just being like, how many pages is it to do this?
Yeah, you don't want it to be like pages and pages in one document, because it can look very overwhelming. Certain things, yeah, you could go down 3 pages of each step, because that could be a very large task. Ideally, what you would want though is you would want kind of like videos to save a bit of it, but also kind of sub SOPs which go into a different document, which if they're already logged into something, they don't need to go follow it, but it's then not. Because, yeah, imagine being handed like a 10-page document. Right, okay, this is how you do one task in your job.
Yeah.
You'd be like, wow.
How many tasks do I have to do?
Like,
it's a novel. That is my,
I know.
It's a manual. It's a novel.
Yeah, you'd be really scared. So you never want an SOP to be like 10 pages long. But you do have to have the detail in there that someone else doesn't need to be asking you constantly.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, like, your team members are always going to have either you as a leader, a manager, etc., to ask questions to. But you don't want to be spending your time answering a lot of very small, silly questions, because your time gets absorbed so quickly then.
Yeah.
And yeah, especially as you're scaling and you're wearing so many hats, as well as then becoming a leader, becoming a manager, and you're stepping into that new role. Like, yeah, it's suddenly like, wow, I'm in control of like 4 different people here. I need to manage them. I need to make sure I'm looking after them. I need to make sure that they've got what they need to succeed, as well as doing everything else. And it gets a lot.
Yeah. In my partnership, so my 2 partners, Bradley and Jacob, I made sure to partner with, much like Ken did with you. I made sure to partner with people who were more geared to the detail and things along those lines. But when I started, I had a mentor back about 10 years ago, and he coached me up on a lot of really important things. And one of the first things that he taught me was what gets measured gets managed.
Mm-hmm.
And he was a consulting chiropractor, and he, had all these clinics. I think we had like 13 clinics we were consulting with at the time when I was working with him. And he would have every position was while they would have different tasks that they were responsible for, whatever it was, they would have one KPI that they were responsible for, like that one KPI. Now they had probably 4 or 5 that they would report, but one king KPI, right? For example, the front desk, the KPI was an 80% show rate. That was it. Now they had other things that they would do, but their one thing that they had to report and be accountable for was an 80% show rate. Have you, in your role as in fulfillment and all those types of things, do you establish something along those lines, or how do you measure performance?
So it can be having kind of that leading KPI, and it can be, right, okay, this here is your, essentially, this is what we really want to be hitting. If you do this, this is brilliant. It's a really good way to kind of like measure for bonuses, etc. as well. But it really comes down to kind of the continuous review of team members and saying, right, okay, well, every 3 months I can see that the kind of the KPIs that I'm monitoring them for, they've hit it for 3 months out of 4 that I'm looking at here. Brilliant. And it's going, well, in the 1 month that they didn't, why wasn't it? And how can I help them to achieve that in that month? But it's really looking at yourself from a slightly different perspective, and looking at your agency from a different perspective and saying, right, okay, what does this person really need to be focusing on? If there's one thing that I can give them, what is the most important thing that's going to be super valuable to us as the agency, be super valuable to the clients? And like for an ads manager, that can be a specific KPI. For an account manager, that can be a specific KPI. And it's establishing what's best for the agency, for the clients, and for the team member. Because I think what a lot of people forget about, because we're now building remote teams, aren't we? We're not all sat in an office. Things like that can be really good for company culture, because you can say, right, okay, if the whole team hits their main KPI, this is what we're going to do. Because it is hard being remote to create that company culture, isn't it? And to get that excitement in the team, get people working together. Because like, you could say, right, okay, for the account manager to hit their main KPI, a bit of assistance might be needed from the ads manager. And that might be, well, if the ads manager is doing a crap job, then it is harder for the account manager to hit their KPI.
Yeah,
so
that's
they
right.
need to be working well together as a team.
Right.
And you have to kind of start celebrating the wins a lot and saying, right, okay, awesome, guys, it's Friday. We've all had a really good week. Finish early. Go do this. Let's have a beer on Zoom. Like, what is it that you want to do? Just to say, right, okay, let's celebrate it. Because it's very easy. People all set goals for their team members and they don't celebrate them. They don't say, well done, good job. They just say, cool, I'm going to set it even higher now. And this will, thanks.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I mean, people need recognition. They need reprieve. Like, they need to be able to go through their tasks, do their tasks. And when it's done, the dust needs to be able to settle before they head off and get on the road again. I know we're probably going to get, I don't want to go 5 hours. Well, I wouldn't mind going 5 hours. But there's another concept we were talking about, something I'm really interested in. And as a person, if I were, and in the beginning, so in 2024, I'm going to start documenting and pushing out more content in terms of this idea of a lifestyle agency. Yeah. So I'll frame that out. And to do that, I would need, frankly, somebody like you to say, hey, this is the roadmap to go from where you're at to get to this. Mm-hmm. So let me just explain to me what if I were to start over again in the agency space. So today I have a 7-figure agency, right? And it's great, it's fine. But if I were to start from scratch and knowing all the things that I went through to build that agency and hire the team and this, that, and the other, if I were to start from scratch today, I don't think I would be aiming for a 7-figure agency just to hit 7 figures. Like, revenue is incredibly unattractive to me, mm-hmm. right? Profit is the thing that I would be optimizing for with the least amount of headache.
Yeah.
And when I say headache, I'm talking about overhead, people overhead, issues, customer issues, all of the things where at scale, the headaches just get bigger. Right. And so for me, it's like, dude, I mean, how much money do I really want to support a lifestyle? How much money is take home? Right. And for me, you know, 25, 30 grand, I'm happy with that.
Yeah.
And I think most people would be, you know, at that point in time, you can travel when you want, as long as you have a good operations and things are going well, you're doing good. So if I were to give you the task to lay out for me a sequence of events on how you would start preparing a plan to do something like that, I'm putting you on the spot. But
Yeah.
what are like 3 big things that you would say, these would be the first 3 things I would tackle to optimize for that type of agency?
This is something that, like, when I'll work with some agency owners one-to-one to do this, this is what we focus on, because you have to be happy in your business. I've been unhappy in my business before, and it was horrible. It wasn't nice. You lose the love for your business. You have to love your business. You have to enjoy it to be able to put that passion into it. And that doesn't mean getting to 100K a month. That doesn't mean it. And like you said, for most people, it's like between 20 and 30K a month is what they need to be making. And that's fine. You're doing really well at that point. You're not like, you're doing very well. And I would say the 3 things that you need in place is, first of all, that you need your sales, your client acquisition process dialed in. You know, right, okay, I can consistently just tick over, and I know people, if I need to bring on new clients, I know I can, because there's nothing worse than being at a point and thinking, right, okay, if 5 clients drop off, where are my next 5 clients coming from? That doesn't mean you need to be onboarding clients every single month, but you need to know that, right, I can turn this on, I'm going to get clients out of it. You need to have kind of that predictability behind that process. You then need to know, right, okay, the fulfillment. And if I was to do this again, I would build out a very lean agency. I would it would be as lean as possible, probably not as many team members. But you need to have that fulfillment and client management, client success. You need that as dialed in as possible. You need to know, right, okay, if I'm going away for 5 weeks, I know easily all my clients are going to be happy. And that's so important, because
Yes.
if they're not happy in the time that you're away, your whole agency is still essentially built around you, because you can't leave without clients leaving, essentially. So you need to have that built out. And the last thing that you need to have built out is, you need to know, and it's a bit of a boring one, but you have to know your numbers, essentially. You need to know the numbers of, right, okay, well, what does it take to make all of this happen? And at the end of it, what is my profitability? What is it that I'm coming out with this lean agency? And knowing, right, okay, well, I've got team members, or a team member that I know I can turn on and off for client acquisition and sales. I know my clients are happy. I know my books, etc., are taken care of. I know that payroll is taken care of. I know people are paid at the right time of month, etc. What are the numbers to make all of that happen? And for me to take home that 25 to 30K, which makes you happy, what's the number I actually need to be at? And if you build that out very lean, it's not significantly higher. And it's just working that out, because if you can determine that end number, and if you can say, right, okay, I need to be at 50K a month to make all of this happen, you work backwards, right? Okay, well, each client is worth this much to me. I know it costs this much to acquire a client. And work backwards from it. Work backwards from each number. And that's how I would do it, because I think there is so much out there that you need to be hitting 100K a month. You need to be a 7-figure agency. You need to be an 8-figure agency.
Yeah.
Think back, like having a multi-million-pound or dollar business. That was a massive thing. Now it's become the norm. It's become, you should be doing it. If you're not, what's wrong with you? What are you doing wrong? There's nothing wrong with you.
Well, it's not hard to do 7 figures.
No.
But it is hard to maintain a 50% profit margin.
Exactly. It's very hard, because if you look at kind of the average profit margins for an agency, you're looking at like 20% of a full service agency. It's not huge.
Yeah.
Um, and that's where people get it wrong, because they can say, right, okay, well, you're at 100K a month, you've got 20 of it to play with. That's your profit margin at the moment, and that's what people don't understand. And it's going, right, okay, well, if I build this out in a different way, what's my profit margin on that? If I got to 50K a month, well, I could
Yeah.
potentially be taking home more than that, more than what I would be taking home at 100K a month.
Yeah.
And that is a big thing that people don't realize. And I can't stress it enough. You've got to be happy in your business. You're doing this for you. And it is, your business becomes your child almost, like, because you spend so much time in it. You spend so much time thinking about it. When you lose that passion and you lose that excitement for your business, you need to rethink the way
Yeah.
you're doing things, because
Likely you lose the passion because your profit margins shrink.
yeah,
Right. Because you started out and you're charging whatever you're charging. You're like, oh man, this is gravy. I'm just making all this money. But then you hire people, you put 30 softwares together because you think you need 30 softwares, whatever it is. And now all of a sudden you're like, dude, I'm running like no profit margins. This is no fun. It's funny because I can trace back to different parts of my experience running an agency. And one of the things that, again, this would be 2024 when we really start putting out more of this type of content and abilities. Just Jacob, my partner, is very data driven, and he pulled our reports for retention and saw a drop off at 3 months and drop off at 5 months. But after 5 months, a retention like crazy. And so we started messing around. It's like, well, first of all, why do people drop off at the 3rd month? Why do they drop off at the 5th month? And really, it evolved around one, adoption. Okay. So like just that initial adoption period, which is about 30 days from what we found. 30 days adopting, using, checking back in, all that kind of stuff. And then after that, it was just regular communication. If people felt like they were achieving their goals, they stayed. And so the first thing that we did, and it was a hypothesis, and it worked out, was this concept I call like slow onboarding. And the whole idea of slow onboarding was we used to try and jam everything into like a 15-minute onboarding call because we thought that was good. We thought that was good, right? And instead of doing that, what we did was we said, okay, first of all, we're going to have an onboarding experience, because it was more so technical. It was like, all that kind of stuff. So it was more like an onboarding experience. I made a video. There was a 10-minute video that whoever was onboarding, usually it was Jonathan or Heather, they would do the onboarding and they'd say, hey, we're really excited to have you here. Before we jump in, let me get a couple things from you so I can be setting you up while we're doing this. But I have a video that our founder, Sam, made. So they would watch the video. And my point of the video was to reframe their experience, because I knew that the bulk of them would have come from other agencies that burned specific bridges. I knew the bridges that they would burn. And so I'd have to go build back those bridges and say, hey, this is a new thing. So that was the goal of that. And then at the end of that call, we weren't talking about, hey, you can do review automation, you can do all these things. That wasn't it. It was click these buttons and you can launch your own ads. And at the end, they would say, good job, you just replaced every agency you've ever worked with. That was the only goal, right? And then we would follow up the next day, and then we'd follow up a week later, and there would be different benchmarks, different purposes to those things. And as soon as we assigned a singular outcome to that, to each thing, then it was like, okay, well, that means we don't have to do these other things. We can do them later, or we can do them independent of our client being on the call with us, right? And our retention increased, the adoption, which is the big one, if they use the tool that you set up for them, they'll stay.
Yeah.
So, and I think, but by the way, that's just been the last year that I figured that out. Okay. So for everybody who's watching this, Jess, you probably figured it out before we did. Just that fulfillment experience right there, which is why I say fulfillment is so much more important than acquisition. If you can keep customers, you will have the most attractive business that you can imagine. If you churn them quickly, it'll be no good.
100%. And that's where people, it really starts with the onboarding. And that's what people forget, because what happens is people become a client of yours. They're super excited. They've had a sales call or they've watched a VSL. However, they've come to you. They're really excited. They've got these goals. They're like determined. They're like, right, this is the person that's going to help me hit these goals. Straight after that, they're on that high, but then it just starts to drop down. Those doubts come back into their mind. Well, last time I did this, actually this happened. Well, it's now about keeping that excitement and reminding people, right, okay, this is why you're here. And it's going to account managers, right, we're here to keep these people excited. We're here to say, right, okay, this is your goal. This is what we're going to do together to hit that. This here, or like for UpHex clients, it's right, okay, well, I'd actually recommend this month, why don't you bump your ad budget up by $10 a day? And let's get you up to this many leads, and let's see how your close rate does on that. And but it's keeping that excitement with clients as well, because it's very easy for, first of all, agencies onboard clients and just kind of forget about them. They become a number, they're not a person. And it's about retaining your clients, because if you can't retain clients, you have a massive problem. And people don't see that as the problem. Well, I just get more clients. That's not the objective of what you're trying to do. That's not why you're in this. That's not why you're in this space. You want to be able to get more clients, but you also want to be able to keep the ones you've got. Because when you keep clients, they refer other clients to you. They're happy. They're going to leave you good reviews. When you annoy them, the word's going to get out that don't work with you, don't work with your agency. They're going to potentially leave you bad reviews, which don't necessarily like are dreadful, but you don't want them. And I don't know, for me personally, I feel bad. I don't want someone to walk away.
There's nothing good. Yeah, there's nothing good about having
anything out of it. Like you're there and you're like, right, okay, like someone spent money with me, nothing happened. That's a rubbish feeling.
Yeah.
It almost became, I know in the full service space, became like, right, okay, well, you just need to keep a client for 3 months. That's why you do a 3-month contract. You've got to keep them for that 3 months. And you make all these kind of false promises that month 2, that's when you're going to see this massive hike in results. And I can't emphasize it enough. Like you said, you have to be able to keep your clients. And it's about checking in with them. You can automate your check-in process with clients. You don't need to have a manual process to do that. Like, for example, every single Friday, a client can get an email saying, hey, how are things going? Is there anything that next week we can support you better with? Some people will say, well, no, I don't even need to reply to it. That's fine. Other people will say, yeah, actually, this week I struggled on this a bit. Is there any chance someone could show me how to do this? You could just send a Loom video back to them on how to do it. Perfect. You've got a happy client now. You don't need to make it super manual. You can have calls, which are brilliant, but it doesn't need to be every Friday to check in with a client. You can send out an automated email.
Yeah, it's like communication ascension. Whenever we would get a complaint from a customer, I trained my team. It's like, if you get a complaint, you must call.
Yeah.
There's no sending Loom videos. There's no emailing back. You cannot do that. Like, you have to aggressively show you have resolved their issue with a beyond measure, right? That was the other thing in my agency. Once we started using UpHex, because we didn't have media buyers and we could handle so much more, like just more volume. Now the person who was handling customer service, she started being like, well, I can proactively provide support. Hey, I noticed your lead volume was falling a little bit. We made a couple of adjustments. Check your account for the next, 3-4 days to see the changes, and we'll touch bases again. And if people feel like you're doing something for your money, right? They're like, oh, sweet, no problem,
Exactly.
right? If they feel like I started the communication, I'm the person watching my results, that's a recipe for disaster. And by the way, usually if that happens one time, because it's happened with other agencies, that's strike 1, 2, and 3 all in one complaint and they're gone. So, well, this has been lovely. We could go on for forever. I guess if people want to connect with you, how would they do that?
Just send me a friend request on Facebook. I'm on LinkedIn as well. But yeah, shoot me a friend request on Facebook. I'm in the group anyway. I'm in the UpHex group.
Yep.
Ask me questions. I'm here to answer as many questions as you've got. But yeah, it's just focus on the core parts of your agency and focus on being happy in your business. Create the agency you actually want to work in. You're happy running.
Yeah, money is good, time is better. And so you need a happy balance between the two. And again, the agency lifestyle can be amazing. But there's that time building, and then there's that gap. If you know what things to do to get over the gap, it really does get smaller. So Jess, thank you. It's been lovely talking with you, and appreciate everything you do in the group. Yeah, people can reach out to you and ping you in the group. That's awesome.